So you've got your basil from your favorite supermarket. You take it out, you've got a lot of good basil in here. You put it onto your shelf where there is a lot of sunlight, thinking that you're gonna have a really good, never-ending supply of basil. But a few days later, maybe 1 or 2 weeks later, it ends up looking like this.
A very sad looking limp plant. Not exactly what you want, is it?
So how do we save this poor basil plant? So when we first get the basil plant, there's a lot of good healthy basil in here. Now the problem that we have with this basil plant is that the supermarket has actually been really generous. They've given you, let's say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. They've given you 14 basil plants within this one tiny pot.
And this means that each stem of your basil plant is competing each other for nutrients, water and light. And by overcrowding your basil, that is what's going to kill your basil plant. So from this one basil plant, we're going to split it to make it into 2. And from there, we're going to take some cuttings and propagate them into a 3rd and 4th basil plant.
So from this basil plant, you can get 4 times the amount of basil from just this one pot. So the first thing you have to do, once you take this out of its pot, you will notice that there is a lot of roots, especially when you can see it at the bottom. The roots are all splaying out. They're just competing within the same amount of soil, within a really small amount of nutrients to be able to grow. So competition for these basil plants are very, very high.
So what you're going to do is you're going to rip apart the soil at the halfway point so that there are an equal number of stems in each batch.
And it may look really scary, but trust me, it feels like you're ripping away all the roots, but you're actually helping the plant. All you have to do is get some really good soil. I like to use this Houseplant repotting mix. I just got this from Amazon. And the good thing about this is that it's peat free, meaning that the drainage of this soil is a lot stronger. So this one is the one that I use. I'll link it in the description box below.
I put about 1 centimeter height of soil on the bottom of the pot, and that's where I'll place the basil cluster on top.
My pots are slightly bigger than the ones that they've provided, so they can house a lot more. So 7 in these pots should be okay.
I start to fill the remaining pockets around the plant with more soil until the pot is completely filled with soil.
Once you've potted all the soil, drench it in water wherever the soil is, because that will get rid of all of the air bubbles in the soil. Let all of the water drain through, and then you can just keep it on your shelf where there's a lot of sunlight, and your plant is good to go. Now the next thing I like to do with the basil plant is to take some cuttings, and this is where you can grow some new propagated plants from the same basil plant. And plus, because this is so leggy, you want to give it a bit of a haircut. If we have a look at this basil plant in particular, so let's take this as our example right here, because this has a good healthy node. Where I would cut to extract my basil is I would cut right at the top of this node. So wherever there is a leaf, like a double leaf, that's where a node is, and I would chop right at the top here. So once you cut that, these little leaves, they'll stop growing as a little flower like they would at the top right here, but they will actually turn into branches. So this is an existing basil that I've already had. And where I have cut at the top, so you can see this one, I've cut at the top here before, right here. And you can see that these have grown into 2 new branches. Now I've done it to quite a few of them, so this one's also done the same. I've cut right here, and now I've got 2 of these little branches right there. And so it ends up becoming a bushier plant rather than a leggier plant. So then you actually get a lot more basil leaves from this plant.
So let's have a look at this next example. We're going to have a look at the stem, and where those 2 leaves are, that is a node point, and we're just going to cut right above this node point and then keep that extraction as our propagation leaf. And now have a look at where we've cut. You can see that there are little tiny leaves next to this cut, and instead of those leaves just turning into bigger leaves, they are actually going to become new branches for a more bushier basil plant. So using the same method, I'm going to take a few more cuttings from this basil plant.
And now taking those cuttings, I put them into some water.
But before I do that, I actually like to take off the excess really large leaves because this will delay the growth of the roots. But also I like to just add them into my pasta that I'm about to make. So it's a win-win bonus because you get to have some amazing tasty basil for your cooking tonight. Now I have to say that these cuttings are a little shorter than I usually would do it. I would usually pick longer stems than this, but because of where the nodes are in this particular basil plant that I received, this is the best that I could do.
I change the water every 2 days or so just to keep the water fresh and clean and also prevent a lot of mold growth. And then after about 2 or 3 weeks, you should start to see roots growing. I'll show you the ones that I've done from last week. A lot of the harvest from the previous plant, and I have taken it into here. You can see some of the roots growing. And now this is only about 1 week's time frame. So give it another week or so. When the roots become about 2 centimeters, that's when I would start repotting these ones into soil. So you got another basil plant right here. Hope that you can transform one of these from the supermarket into plenty of these in your homes. You will have so many dishes that you can create with this one basil from the supermarket. Hope you enjoyed this video as much as I did creating it, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!